'cause a new way you sound so sincere. How sweet it must be to be able to think so clear. But you're just another in a long line of fools. Giving us freedom with a new set of rules.
Hello all. With me today, I have a gentleman by the name of Jose Vega, or Jose Vega, I should say. He is a political activist in the US who is supporting Diane Sayre, who's an independent candidate running in New York, who's ran in New York. Jose has been doing some very, very important work in exposing how the US is supplying weapons and supporting Ukrainian neo-Nazi military and political factions in Ukraine. It is something that I've been concerned about here in Australia as well. And I've been lobbying our Deputy Prime Minister, who is the Defence Minister, Richard Marles, who is supplying howitzers and Bushmasters and also undertaking training of Ukrainians to feed into these neo-Nazi battalions in Ukraine. That's only going to increase their power, I feel. So, I'd like to introduce Jose, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a real honour having you here. I've followed your work. You've done.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I saw your interview with Scott Ritter too. Very good. Very, very good.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So you have been following. Yeah. I did not expect it to go that long, but he just had a lot to say. So
Scott's got a lot of knowledge, so it will go a long time.
Yeah.
So you've been active on an issue which is in line with my own research in regards to Ukraine's neo-Nazi political ideology, factions in Ukraine and their control over the Ukrainian government and body politic.
Mm-hmm.
With the existing Ukraine neo-Nazi battalions such as Right Sector, Azov, SS Galician branded Lviv Battalion, C-14 Carpathian Sich, which an Australian went over and fought for recently and has passed away over there. Free Corps unit, and also the Svoboda National Guard, which are these very hardcore neo-Nazi military units in Ukraine. And just to give you an example, I'm going to show you a clip of a national celebration in Ukraine. Then we'll be back, which shows the ideology, I suppose, of Ukraine. I mean, it's culture. So here is the video clip.
Слава нації! Слава нашій білій, чистій слов'янській нації! Україна – священна земля білих людей!
He says, glory to our clean, white, Slavic race of Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is the holy land of the white human race. Now, it cannot be more obvious than that, Jose. It can't be, can it?
Well, no. I think one of the groups that you mentioned, C-14, if I'm not mistaken, that's actually like a youth sector from the Svoboda political party. Is that right?
No, that's actually a military unit. It is a military unit. It may have started off as a youth group, but it's a military unit. And the 14 is associated with neo-Nazis, and you may know this, with the 14 words of the US neo-Nazi extremist David Lane in his slogan.
Yeah.
And David Lane was known for murdering a Jewish radio announcer. And I think one of his followers also plotted to murder Barack Obama, which was alleged. So, yeah, a real incredible name of a unit in Ukraine, and that's only one of them. You know, the fact that, and I want to ask you this question, the fact that billions of dollars of US taxpayers' money is spent on weapons to these white supremacist neo-Nazi battalions. Do you think this is an insult to the African American community, and also the non-African American community and those who are financially struggling in the US?
I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, first of all, yeah, of course, I think it's an insult, really for all Americans because, there's always the excuse of like, well, we can't cancel student debt because it's too expensive. We can't do Medicare for all because it's too expensive. We can't do this because it's just too much money trying to fix infrastructure. God, what are you, crazy? And as a result, I think people have gotten jaded and pessimistic and have resorted to trying to just do state action and stuff. And, the ballot initiatives, which I've been reading about a lot and people have been trying to present to me, I think, work for some issues. But, to your question, like, I mean, yeah, of course it is. One of the interventions that I did before the infamous AOC town hall one was against Congressman Jamal Bowman. And he was doing a town hall with Hakeem Jeffries. Now, Hakeem Jeffries, by the way, everybody's speculating he's going to be the next Speaker of the House or the House Minority Leader after Nancy Pelosi leaves. In 2013, Hakeem Jeffries wrote a letter to the ambassador in Ukraine denouncing the anti-Semitism that was in Ukraine. Okay, and then I even linked that underneath my intervention, and then I went to go find it. The announcement page of, hey, Hakeem Jeffries has put out this letter is there. But if you try to access the letter itself, it's gone. It's gone. And so there are other examples, like in 2018, Ro Khanna put out a joint letter with people like Hakeem Jeffries denouncing Azov Battalion, denouncing them receiving the money, so on and so forth. So, Jamal Bowman is a congressman, and Hakeem Jeffries too is a congressman in very poor parts of New York City. So Jamal Bowman's district ranges from the Bronx, which is this area called Gun Hill Road. Now, for those who don't know their geography, for those who are international, people might recognize the name of the Bronx, but the Bronx is a pretty big place also. And so his district is from one of the poorest neighborhoods in the Bronx, which is called Gun Hill Road, all the way up to this neighborhood called Hastings-on-Hudson, which is one of the richest areas in New York City, in New York State, period. And so it's kind of like this tale of two cities thing. And so, in the intervention, it starts out saying we could do more on crime, we could do more on gun control, we could do more for the Black agenda. And then I come in and I say, you're a hypocrite because you are funding the same supremacists, the same white supremacists who kill in the name of white supremacy. The Azov Battalion wears the Black Sun symbol, right? The same symbol that the guy who almost killed the vice president of Argentina used. It's the same one that there was a mass shooting here in New York, up in Buffalo, New York. And this was like some teenager, I think it was like an 18 or 19-year-old guy who was wearing the Black Sun symbol as he shot up this black supermarket. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one thing. And not only that, in New Zealand, in the Christchurch massacre,
right,
Brendan Tarrant had the book, The Replacement Theory, or whatever it was called, which had the Nazi black symbol. And apparently he had traveled to Eastern Europe. Allegedly, he went to Ukraine as well before he did that. So you are so right. It'd be interesting to see Jamal go down to his community there and say, look, I'm sorry, I can't fund any more for you because I'm funding Nazis in Ukraine. Could you imagine him going to the streets and saying that in communities that are strongly against racism? I mean, you just take a broad look at it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It is just crazy. Now, the next one I want to speak about, and this is about, African American leaders who are addressing this. I spoke directly to the president of the NAACP, and you know who that is, the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured Peoples, Derek Perkinson, I think. He's the president. And I got him on his cell phone because I have his number and it was available on a site, a website. And I spoke to him on the issue of funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Okay. And what it can mean if foreign fighters from the US go there and come back radicalized with post-traumatic stress syndrome and weapons trained, and another potential Buffalo massacre. Right, so I spoke to him about this, and this was in May. He done nothing. He didn't respond. He didn't look into it. Now, for those in the American community who are worried about another Buffalo, I find that very concerning. And could you give me sort of a reason why you think he didn't respond or he didn't stand up on this issue?
Yeah. Actually, you gave me a good idea, actually, for who to interview next. If you're afraid of another Buffalo, don't blame the shooter, blame people like Bowman, But I think something I can tell you is that after the intervention I did with Bowman promised to speak with me, and he did, to his credit, after about 20, 30 minutes. And I asked him the same thing. I was like, first I said, listen, I wouldn't have stood up and said something if you just, had questions asked, right? If people could ask questions, because I came not expecting to intervene. I was just told, we'll be able to ask questions. Like, okay. But they took no questions at all. So when I spoke with him afterwards, and I think this might be the same thing, and I'll explain why I think they both give similar responses, which is nothing. Basically, I broke it down and I said, what's going on here? Why are we funding neo-Nazis? He said, first of all, you're not from my district, which is true. I'm from the South Bronx. He's up in the Gun Hill Road, Northern Bronx. But, he said, first of all, you're not from my district. Secondly, go talk to your congressman about that.
I've heard that excuse here in Australia when I've called up people on the Joint Senate Defence Committee in regards to bringing this issue up on us spending money on Nazis in Ukraine, our defence spending. I've heard the same excuse. Oh, you're not from my district, but I say to them, hang on, but you're on the Joint Defence Committee.
Yeah, so right.
You should be addressing this issue. So it's not to do with me being in your district. Yeah, very good point. Go ahead.
No, of course. It's like you make decisions that affect all Americans. It's not just the people of your district. So anyway, after I got him to kind of say, I was like, okay, but what are you going to do about this? Because this is an injustice. His exact words were something along the lines of we're going to continue to do the work that we came to do on the issues that we're trying to do. Something like that. I put this, it's on my Twitter. I'll send you so you can get the exact, it was something so ridiculous like that. It was like a Kamala Harris-esque level response. Now, why? Why is there no response from people like the NAACP president or people like Bowman? Well, you saw this letter that came out. It was a joint letter done by the Progressive Caucus of the House. And this was led by a Congresswoman, I forget her name, Jamal, I don't remember her name. But she heads this caucus, and there were about 30 other congressmen who all basically signed this pathetic letter that was just kissing Joe Biden's butt and saying oh, Mr. Biden, what you've done in Ukraine is great and amazing, and we love it all. If you could please just add just a little diplomacy. Not even 24 hours later, they got smacked and they had to retract the letter. And they said, actually, why? Because it shows you that none of these people have any actual power or influence into what's going on in Ukraine. And so that's why, I don't really want to give them too much crap for this. I mean, you should, because they're elected representatives at the end of the day. They should be listening to what people are saying, and they should be listening to reason. But who is the person behind the scenes who's telling them, you need to take that letter down? You need to retract that.
Hang on, Jose.
Yeah.
Integrity. Now, if you stand for the people, you should stand for integrity. And I do like to put pressure on those individuals because they have a responsibility. And as we say in Australia, the word there being is piss week. We call it. That's our word.
Piss week.
Piss week.
Okay.
That week is piss. They don't stand up for moral issues. Now, this is funding white supremacists that can come back and bite communities in the US.
Of course.
So they have a responsibility. I don't care if they've got pressure up the top. That's a moral question for them. And if they
the Charlottesville, Charlottesville, some of the Azov battalion people came and trained some of these people down in Charlottesville. I don't know if you know about this, but yeah, it's a documented fact that there were members of Ukrainian nationalists, white nationalists, who came to Southern Carolina and, you know, marched with some of these torchbearers during the, you know, that whole weird protest where they had the torches and tiki torches and stuff. And some of these people had trained them in the art, you want to call it, the tactics of protesting. So that tells you that, like, it's already infiltrated the United States, right? The color revolution tactics that we see funded in other countries exist here already, and you see it on both sides, right? And you know, that's an example of them doing it on, like, the extreme right wing, as people call it, on the white supremacy issue. And you know, the United States has a long history of doing this, right? A lot of white supremacist groups in the United States after the 1950s were run and funded by the FBI and the CIA, you know, intelligence agencies, right, for the purpose of sowing discourse. And today it's still the case. And so, you know, I agree with you, of course, putting pressure on these people. I mean, that's why I went to go yell at Bowman and AOC, and people are yelling at Ilhan Omar, because, you know, I like to emphasize this point. It's like, there's a quote from Edgar Poe. Well, it's actually Poe quoting Chamberlain. You know, what say of it? What say of conscious grim, that specter in my path? And that comes from a short story that Poe wrote called William Wilson, where he, you know, the character has like this identical twin who goes to the same school. And this identical twin is like the absolute perfect ideal of what the character's trying to be. And he feels guilty about it because he knows he should be doing that. And so I don't want to give away the spoiler, but basically, when I yell at these people, or when anybody confronts these people, as we've seen, because these interventions have grown and gotten bigger, people like Biden have been called out, Obama have been called out, Pompeo and other people who are not affiliated with anything I do at all have been calling them out. They don't see you unless you say the right thing. Like, they see the ghost of their former selves, especially the squad. Because there was a time when the squad, you know, like Jamal Bowman, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, all these people, there was a point in their time when they believed in something good. And they were radicalized too. And they became vulnerable the moment they entered the Congress and they were in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And they lost who they were.
They lost their integrity, basically. And, you know, they've, as we say, they've got to be fair income about, fair income means genuine, but be fair income about representing their constituents and protecting their constituents from future atrocities like Buffalo. I just want to say something about my country. In Australia, we were one of the first countries in the world to have a white Australia policy and apartheid before South Africa. The way we've treated Indigenous First Nations Australia in our past is shocking. A friend of mine is the son of a famous Indigenous actor who was in the movie called Australia with Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman. He's been my friend and a great mentor on culture for a long time. And I want to ask you, because this can happen in Australia, race hate crimes can come back here. You know, they can come back from us sending over or allowing people to go and fight. Interestingly enough, in 2020, our security agency blocked Australians from fighting in Ukraine for this very reason in 2020. But suddenly in 2022, it's open season for any Australian to go and fight with these neo-Nazi battalions. What is your message to the Indigenous First Nations people of Australia on this issue? And in regards to our government funding these neo-Nazis, but our First Nations people have been, you know, invaded when our country was formed, you know, killed to near extinction. Their communities are struggling and they need support, you know, to get their culture back. And I've been involved in some of those activities. What's your message to them on this issue of our government's misguided approach in funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine?
I think, you know, when you're confronted with a great injustice like this that has greater moral implications, what you need to do is you need to mobilize and organize in a creative, in a nonviolent, direct, creative way. That's what I believe. Now, people like to disagree and say, well, no, we need violence. We don't need violence. We need this. We need that. I believe you need nonviolent creative direct action. And one of the things that I often quote is this letter from a Birmingham jail that Dr. King wrote, where he says, what we seek to do with nonviolent protests and demonstrations is we go to communities where often negotiations are not on the table, where we go to communities that are largely populated by African Americans, and yet, the people who represent them are racist and, don't want to represent them. What we do is we seek to create a sort of Socratic tension in the minds of people to where we dramatize the issue to where it can no longer be ignored. And so I would say that to the people of Australia. I don't know the intricacies of Australia. I don't understand the government of Australia, but I do know this. Injustice anywhere can be confronted with the same tactics of nonviolence and creative direct action. And if you can create tension through that and raise this as an international issue, I think you'll be able to get it fixed. And I think, isn't Australia part of the Five Eyes, right? And
yeah, the Five Eyes that only see in one direction. Look, and that's US foreign policy. But what you said, because our Indigenous community have a very, very active political presence, because they've had to survive for so long. I mean, they're the oldest continuous culture in the world, So they've survived so much. And I have a lot to do with the community. So I think they could really speak out against this misguided approach, and the general Australian-wide Australian community, including the Australian Jewish community, which I think really should be opening their eyes to this issue. It's just been so much covered up since the intervention in Ukraine by Russia. Another thing I'd like to say is, in regards to the NAACP, my message back would be for your communities to get active as well. Let's all do this, and get in the face of the politicians. And also, I would like people to call up Derek Perkinson to step up, because he does represent the African American community, and he should be, preventing another buffalo. So his number you can call him on, which is available on the New York Council website I found, or a site, is 646-659-9850. And I would ask people to give him a call, because I think these people, and politely, I would say, ring up politely, ask politely, no silly calls, no aggression, and ask him in a polite way, Mr. Perkinson, what are you doing about this issue of America funding, or our country funding, neo-Nazi white supremacist factions in Ukraine, which can put a threat of future buffalo shootings and other race hate crimes? I would suggest that, because I think we have to get in their face in a polite way, in a peaceful way. Because if we don't, they get away with it, and they just continue on their merry way of doing whatever they please.
Can I say one more thing? I just want to say, I'm really happy that Diane Sayre ran for Senate against Chuck Schumer here in New York, because I think it's allowed the international community to kind of mobilize against the behemoth that people see as the United States. She had this billboard called "U.S. out of NATO." And here in the United States, that means one thing. But internationally, people know NATO is the U.S. The United States gives 60, 70% of the funding to NATO, right? So, and I'm glad to say that, she is running again in 2024 against Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. And I think one of the ideas you gave me is we really should just be doing some kind of mobilization in the streets, where we're letting people know, hey, if there's another race-based motivation shooting, ask AOC and Bowman, right? Is it really gun control? Maybe. But why are they racist and hateful? Where are they getting this from? And why are they funding the same people who have those same ideals?
On that point, you saw that in Italy, I think it was on the 15th of November, just recently, the police caught a a neo-Nazi cell about to do
Yeah.
an attack, and they were tied to Azov in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
the fruits of the funding Nazi labor are coming out now. And this will get worse. And I want to make that point that these neo-Nazi groups, they lie underground under the surface and they resurface. And then when conditions are not good, they'll lay low. And then when conditions are right, they'll come up. They don't go away. They're like a malignant cancer. And we need to root them out. And we need to root out who is supporting them. And I'm so glad that you're doing that. And talking about NATO and that, what you said of that subject. Yeah, Stoltenberg said, since 2014, even under the Minsk peace agreement, they were funding these neo-Nazi battalions. So if you go see a fight and two people are fighting and one's got a baseball bat and one's got a knife, and you want to stop them fighting, you don't give them more weapons, do you? You don't say, hey, you have another weapon, you have another weapon.
You're right.
And they say, oh, but we want peace and we want a peace agreement between each other. You don't keep giving them weapons when you want them to honour a peace agreement between each other, do you? And that is what NATO did. Stoltenberg came out and said it. And as you said, the US are just, handling it against Russia. They're doing it in a very subtle and strong way, yeah. But subtle but strong, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I just think what you said is right. And I also think, they happen, the people in power aren't as omnipotent and powerful as people like to think they are, because if they were, they wouldn't need to resort to assassinating people. They wouldn't need to resort to putting people on kill lists, They obviously can't get away with what they're doing. They know that, they live on a house of cards, and it's already collapsing because of what they've done. And they're trying to hide that. That's what's going on. And so I think what needs to amount is to just keep building up that tension everywhere, everyone in every country. In Australia too, I'd love to see the indigenous people rise up against this issue also. I'm sure they are already. Everybody needs to continue to just push and raise the tensions and stake and dramatize this so that this begins a period in history where 2,000 years from now, people will continue to study this and say, this was a period in time when the people mobilized against nuclear war. It wasn't a Kennedy. It wasn't Reagan and the INF Treaty. It was the international people, the people of Earth, who jointly stood up against nuclear war. Because that's where we are right now. We don't have a Kennedy.
Exactly. I'm 55, and I remember as a young person the Cold War and how scary that was. And obviously you've spoken to Scott Ritter, who talks about that. And we are getting close to that. We are not even getting to the area between Russia and the US about disarmament. We're moving away from that. Now hypersonic weapons are coming in to the arms race mix from the US and Russia. And nuclear payloads on a hypersonic weapon, you've got no time. It's just like that, bang, and you're vaporized. By the time a hypersonic weapon comes in with that nuclear payload, you're not even ready. And this is a danger we face. And all these environmentalists who are saying, about caring about the environment, will have no environment with World War III. The one tree standing on the earth if we have a nuclear apocalypse. So this is what we need to do. Now, on that, do you have any final messages, mate, at all in regards to these issues?
My final message, I think I said it already, continue to raise the tensions. Support Diane Sayre 2024, look into her campaign, because that's what's next. We're going to use her platform to mobilize people, teach people how to organize, and teach people how to change things, because that's ultimately what matters. So that's my final message.
Exactly. And, the duopoly you have and we have to have other options than two-party system. As I think Garland Nixon said, the left wing and the right wing are part of the one bird. But there's
Exactly.
also in Australia, there's a mythical bird called the Uslan bird, which has one wing. And let's hope more people like Diane, who are the Uslan bird of the world, come out more and find a different way and a different path to the status quo we have now.
Amen. I agree.
Thanks, mate. Really good to speak to you. You keep up the good work. You're doing a marvelous job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and good to see. How old are you now? Sorry,
I'm 24.
To see young people like yourself standing up and stepping up is a good role model for other young people to step up and to keep informed. Be smart. Don't just sit in camps. Be informed. Speak to different people. Widen your view. Don't stick in, oh, I'm the Republican camp, or I'm in the Democrat camp. You're just being played, being in camps. You've got to go out and speak to different people. Speak to Diane, speak to different views, and make up your own mind. That's democracy. That is democracy. Not a duopoly of a status quo. That's not democracy.
Yeah, agreed.
Good to see you, and hope to have another interview with you later and get some updates.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
All right. Thanks, mate.